Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new video of Fox Flicks on Popcross Studios. Today we're gonna see about Bendy and the Dark Revival characters as fantasy tale creatures. Or I guess really it's more so Bendy and the Dark Revival as a fantasy story. Let's hop in and I'll move the camera once we're going.
Warning that today's episode contains spoilers for both Bendy and the Dark Revival and Bendy and
There
the
we
Ink
go.
Machine. I mean, I am heavily adapting elements from both those stories to
There we
make
go.
them fit
We're
into a
good.
fantasy setting with knights and dragons and things like that, but you would very easily be able to infer things that happen in the game from the stuff I'm talking about in this story. But if that hasn't scared you away, then I think you're in
Go
for a
watch
fun
the game
video
first,
because I'm
and then
quite
come
pleased
back.
with how my art and my tale has turned out for my first full-fledged Bendy episode. Let's get into it, shall we?
Wow.
Hit like if you want. Subscribe
If you feel like it.
But either way, enjoy the show.
As the island of my knowledge grows, so do the
Sweet.
shores of my
Starting it off with
ignorance.
Audrey
This
Drew.
saying was more prominently ringing
Wait, is
in
that
my
her last
mind
name?
this week, as I'd been seeking out information
so.
on other realms that may be intrinsically connected to my own.
There you
I'd
go.
learned of one while researching the creatures of songs recently, and wondered how many
Oh, yeah.
others existed without my knowledge. This search led me to speaking to a woman with a very intriguing tale. Her name was Audrith, and she once believed herself to be a simple painter, working as one of many in the Gentic kingdom. The royals of
Okay.
Gentic had always had an obsession with art, and as such had for centuries employed distinguished art curators to constantly adorn their castle walls and grounds with more and more revolving pieces.
Sounds like an easy
Audrith
paying
had been
gig.
a painter for them for years, and had been told that her father once did the same sort of work, though she'd never actually met him nor knew much else about his life. Audrith was painting well into the night one eve, working on a piece that depicted one of the kingdom's iconic fictitious creatures, a friendly protector dragon called Bendigon. She was running
Bendigon.
low on black
Huh.
ink, which was an
Okay.
essential element in most of the pieces from her kingdom, as the glimmering black was the
Interesting
prominent
choice
shade
for Bendy,
used to
but
create
okay.
most of the castle's frequently painted creatures. She set into the dark halls of the castle to seek more, but as she came to the room where supplies were kept, she was faced with a groundskeeper. His name was Wilsevith, and he claimed to be cleaning the supply room, but had no tools with which to do so. He told her there was no more ink kept here, but that he could show her where to find more. He led her down and down into the bowels of the castle, and every step Audrith considered turning back.
Yeah,
They
probably
went
should have
even
done that a lot
beneath the
sooner.
dungeons to a room that Audrith had no idea had existed prior to that night. Inside
Too
it was
late
an
now.
intricately carved throne, surrounded by empty cauldrons. The groundskeeper told her that this was an enchanted creation, rarely used by the kingdom now. It had been forged by one of the previous art curators, named Joseph Druden. By sitting on it
Oh.
and reading a set of incantations, one could cause the cauldrons to instantly fill with ink. Audrith was skeptical, but simultaneously
Sounds
intrigued, as she'd heard rumors and whispers of this throne before, but believed it to be a myth, as she'd never actually seen magic
Wait,
conducted,
is this kind of like the
let
Black
alone had a
Cauldron,
chance
the Disney
to
movie?
use it herself. Wilsevith handed her a scroll with the incantations, and she sat upon the throne to read them. The more she said, the more she could hear bubbling, sloshing sounds coming from the cauldrons around her. As she said the final phrase, they filled, just as the groundskeeper had said, but then they overflowed.
Yep, there
Ink
it is.
pooled
I
around
knew
her
it was gonna
ankles, and she
happen.
thought she'd
The
done something
overflow.
wrong, but Wilsevith looked pleased. Audrith asked what was going on, but he ignored the question and simply told her, "Come find me on the other side, and I'll show you your true purpose." Audrith was then sucked into the ink, as if the floor had vanished beneath her. She sunk
Damn.
farther and farther down, her body twisting and spinning, before being shot up out of the ink again onto a yellow, stony ground. The castle walls around her looked familiar, but also different. It was as if she was inside a painted version of the Gentic kingdom, made only from golden strokes and, of course,
Just
the
like in the
kingdom's
game.
iconic black ink. Stranger still, Audrith herself had changed. She was now adorned in a suit of armor and wielding both an odd-looking battle hammer along with a glowing spiral
I guess
shield.
it would be a battle
She wanted
hammer.
answers. What
Even
had she
though
just
it's really
done?
just
What had
outright.
Wilsevith made her do? But before she learned any more, she'd be instead faced with more questions, as she noticed ahead, behind the bars of a dungeon cage, was a flesh and blood version of her kingdom's iconic dragon, Bendigon.
Oh. Oh. So are we getting Cute Bendy and Monster Bendy, or just one or the other?
Audrith cautiously
Monster
approached the
Bendy it
cage.
is.
Inside was indeed a living version of Bendigon, looking scared and anxious. He pushed farther into the corner as he saw Audrith come to the bars. As confused as she was, she wanted to reassure this timid-looking creature that she'd painted so many times before.
You gotta give that thing,
She
like,
unlatched
bony
the cage and
wings.
stepped
That is gonna
inside
be
herself,
terrifying.
slowly moving towards the creature, claiming she wouldn't hurt it. As she spoke calmly to him, Bendigon eased from the walls and seemed to grin at her. She reached her hand out towards the creature to gently pet its head. But the
Close
second she
enough.
touched it, her shield suddenly glowed bright and sparks of lightning shot from her palm into the dragon. It
Just like in the
shrieked
game.
furiously. She tried to
you don't have a
apologize
shield,
that
it's
she
still-
hadn't meant to harm him, but it was too late. Bendigon's body started to leak ink that pooled around his limbs,
excuse me.
making him grow bigger and bigger. Bone spikes stabbed out of his skin and his eyes coated over black. He still had a grin, but now it came through jagged teeth and looked anything but friendly. Audrith ran, closing the cage behind her, but soon hearing it smash
think you're
open
gonna
with
run.
lumbering claws stomping along the ground behind. The stomps got
Ain't no running
closer
from
and
this
closer
thing.
until she turned down a hall with a closed gateway at the end. She knew she couldn't open it fast enough, but hoped maybe it was weak enough that she could just bash her shield through it. She knew it was a long shot, but she had no choice. She braced her shoulder, but the second she reached the gate, her body suddenly glowed yellow, and she leapt forward, transporting herself straight through it.
The leap
She stopped and looked at herself, stunned, before hearing the mutated Bendigon crash into the bars now behind her. She looked back at the beast in horror, but it was unable to get through the bars itself. It sneered at her angrily before turning and lumbering away.
Leap.
Audrith panted rapidly, both from exhaustion and fear. Not a feeling that would soon disappear. Audrith had been so
No
distracted
doubt
by the
about that.
beast that she hadn't even realized she was not alone in this room. She heard the sloshing step behind her just in time to whip around and see an inky black being coming at her with a sword raised. She thrust her shield forward instinctively and slammed it right into the chest of the being, and once again golden sparks emerged, and the being burst into a puddle of ink. Unfortunately, there were more like it around her, coming forth with various weaponry ready to strike. Audrith pushed through her
Hope
fear
you
to
can fight,
smash
girl.
some with her hammer and eviscerate others with her shield, but they still got closer and closer, and she couldn't keep her eyes on them all. She just barely caught a glimpse of an axe headed for her from behind, when a blade suddenly slashed the being's head from its shoulders. Audrith turned, hammer ready to swing, but this new figure that had just saved her assured her that she was an ally. Her name was Alicia, and she was finally able to give some
here we go.
answers about what this place truly
Good
was.
Alice
She
Angel.
said this was a dark reflection of the real world. She also claimed it had been created by Joseph Druden, using the dark magic of the Ink Throne, concocted into being as a place to trap the souls of those he believed to have scorned him in life. It was also a place where any creation of Druden could be brought to life, though oftentimes they'd come to
How
be in a
do you
twisted,
actually do
mutated
that?
form.
Like, can you draw on
Audrith
paper,
asked
though, and then
if
it
that
just
was the
pops
case
off?
with the monstrous Bendigon that she'd
Eh.
just seen, and Alicia went pale. Alicia said that Wilsevith was seen as a hero in this place because he claimed to have killed what she referred to as the Ink Dragon, and if it truly was still alive, they were all in grave danger.
Ooh, I wonder if he'll do the final boss. Probably not, but that would still be cool. Oh,
Skip
come
the
on now.
wait. Get money fast.
Sorry about that. It's sometimes difficult to hit the pause in time. Let's go.
Audrith had so many more questions, but then heard a snarl and bark that sounded as if it had come from a massive wolf. That halted their conversation. Alicia said she was sorry, but she had to go, that her ally was not fond of new acquaintances. Audrith tried to
suppose.
stop her, but soon she was alone once more, but at least having an idea now. Wilsevith may have trapped her in here and lied to people in this place about having killed the Ink Dragon, but
Wait,
if
why are
he
you
had
using the
been
evil
with her on
Alice?
the outside earlier that day, then he must have a way to escape this place. Her goal now was to survive long enough to find Wilsevith and make him take her home.
I
She
guess
spent
a good
hours
Alice
hunting through
is
the
a
halls,
little too
facing
human.
more and more ink beings
Needs
that
something
seemed set on
monstrous
killing
for
her.
reference.
Luckily,
Okay.
she grew more adept with her weapons, and was soon able to make quick work of them. She did, however, have to hide multiple times from the scouring ink dragon that tore through every being it came across like they were leaves. The towers were easy enough for her to navigate, as they were clearly the same layout as the Gentic Kingdom, but it was as if they were from another time, worn down and almost decaying. She eventually found herself in the very room
From a
that she
time of
painted
past?
in on the
Well,
outside,
a
but
time
in it
that has
now
passed,
was
or
a
a time
man.
yet
He
to
looked
come?
completely familiar to her, though she had no idea why. He didn't attack her, but instead introduced himself as he continued to paint. He said his name was Joseph Druden, but quickly assured her he was not the one from her world, the one who'd created this place, but was instead this world's version of him, not even certain himself if he had
now
a
I know where
soul.
we are.
He was, however, able to tell Audrith more about the real Joseph, that he'd once been a good man who simply wanted to do right by his kingdom, but he grew too addicted to the praise of the royals for his work, and began taking credit for pieces
Happens all the
made by
time.
the artists he employed. Even Bendigon was a creation he claimed responsible for, despite it having been made by a brilliant painter named Henderson Stein. After Henderson left the kingdom, Joseph was unable to find any artist to create comparable works, and the royals began to question his skills as their curator. That was when he turned to dark magic, commissioning his ink throne, originally intending it to create living ink sculptures of Henderson's creations. But the creatures made
Good idea.
proved unpredictable.
Bad
Like the
outcome.
ink dragon, they would eventually become monstrous versions of themselves. This version of Joseph contradicted what Alicia had said earlier, claiming this realm was made to trap inside it the monsters Druden had made. But Audrith didn't know what to believe. She was more inclined not to believe this man, though, when he claimed that Audrith herself was one of Joseph's own creations. His first perfect being,
yeah.
made from the magic of the Ink Throne. He claimed that was why she came into this world with unique abilities and the Banishing Shield, because prior to Joseph's death, he ensured that if she ever came here, she would have power over beings of this realm. But still, Audrith refused
Yeah, I
to
think that
believe
fits
it.
in line with
She
the game.
stormed out of the room only to hear a growling, demonic voice saying,
You're just as beautiful as I hoped you'd be.
Audrith whipped
That
around
was
just in
evil
time to see an
Alice.
arrow shooting
Never
across
mind.
the hall right toward her neck. She threw up her shield and blocked it, then saw a familiar figure approaching. She looked similar to Alicia, but this version of her had a
Nope.
melting face and ink pouring from one blackened eye. She fired the crossbow again, but Audrith raised to block her head once more, and the bolt shot straight through her thigh instead. She
Ooh,
shrieked
man,
in
that's
pain and
kinda
collapsed to the floor, trying to crawl away as the figure got closer.
I want to be beautiful again. Maybe your face will fit nicely over mine.
The figure got
Still
close
trying to be
enough for
beautiful,
Audrith
huh,
to thrust her
Alice?
shield up at her from the ground, but the woman batted it aside and stomped a hooved foot onto Audrith's arm, pinning it down. She aimed the crossbow right for Audrith's neck.
Ooh, damn. Now I see why you were drawing Evil Alice. She was literally coming up in the story. Okay.
Just before the twisted-faced
Yes,
figure
the
could
final
unleash her
boss!
shot, ink suddenly splashed down onto Audrith's face. A blade had been plunged
Hell
right
yeah.
through Audrith's assailant from behind. The woman collapsed, revealing behind her the real Alicia, standing next to a sneering werewolf. Alicia helped pull free the bolt from Audrith's thigh and helped her up, but the wolf snapped its jaws at her. Alicia told it to stand down, but clearly couldn't hold it back for long. Alicia apologized for the attack Audrith had just faced, and claimed that the other version of her was a very long story. Questions continued to pile up for Audrith, but she kept her mind on her task,
Hell yeah.
finding Wilsevith. Before parting ways, Alicia told Audrith that Wilsevith had last been seen in the highest tower, but to be careful that he was not to be trusted. Audrith limped off to find him, still hoping that this realm's Joseph Druden was not worthy of her trust either, as she didn't want to believe herself to be a creation of dark magic. She fought her way to the tower and finally
half
burst
dog
open the door
magic.
to find Wilsevith, the Ink Throne, and, in the center of the room, an ill-rendered painting of what seemed like an aquatic chimera. Audrith ignored the rest and simply
I guess it is
demanded that
kind of a
Wilsevith
chimera.
send her home. He said first he needed her help to finally kill the Ink Dragon for good. He had claimed to have done so, though truly, he'd only managed to temporarily reset it to its original, less menacing form as Bendigon. Wilsevith said that as the one pure creation of the magic of the Ink Throne, Audrith was the only one who could truly aid him in making this realm truly better for all trapped within it. She cautiously inquired as to how, and he stated that all she had to do was sit on the throne, hold the painting of the chimera to her face, and read the words upon it, followed by her own name. The creature this action would create could defeat the Ink Dragon for good. He promised thereafter to tell her how to go home, so she did as instructed. She sat on the throne, held the painting, reading the words, but had one eye looking past the painting, remembering Alicia's advice. This just allowed her to catch Wilsevith in time, as he thrust a blade through the painting towards her. She shifted aside and the blade barely scratched her. She grabbed Wilsevith, spun him around into the chair, took the blade with the painting still pierced around it, and she thrust the dagger right into his chest, stating, "You won't fool me again, Wilsevith." But as his name left her mouth, the throne began to spark. Ink burst from the cauldrons and swirled around Wilsevith and the painting. They began to merge into one. Soon, a mutated chimera near filled the entire room, then exploded into the air through the ceiling. It wrapped its tail around Audrith and lifted her into the air with it. She quickly thrust her shield onto its tail, sparking yellow and golden light. It didn't disintegrate the beast, but it did make it shriek in fury. It released her, and she tried to hold on, but the beast's erratic movements made her slip, and she fell from its back down towards the onrushing earth below. But instead of slamming into unrelenting stone, her body sloshed onto the slimy back of the Ink Dragon. It flew up, dodging around the flailing chimera into the higher golden skies. Holding on to the creature's back, Audrith could hear its voice in her head.
"Merge with me. We can defeat him only as one."
Unsure of what else to do, Audrith allowed her body to sink into the inky hide of this creature. Everything was black for a moment, then blinding golden light burst around her, and soon Audrith was seeing through the Ink Dragon's eyes. Its body now sparked with her golden light as the chimera soared up and bit into their wing. Audrith could feel the pain, but quickly the dragon chomped its own, now sparking fangs into the chimera, who let out a gurgling shriek, releasing its own bite. The Ink Dragon hurtled down towards the ground with the chimera in tow and slammed it into the earth. As the beasts tore at each other, Audrith suddenly realized she could now access memories that were not her own. Memories of the entire history of this place through her connection with the Ink Dragon. She searched through them all as the creature raised its head back with a roar, channeling Audrith's abilities, and unleashed a cannon of banishing lightning directly into the chimera's chest. The creature's cries faded as its body fizzled into a pool of bubbling ink. Audrith was glad Wilsevith was defeated, but was more focused now on the dragon's memories she could recall. In its distant past, she saw a scene of Joseph, older, clearly not the one from this realm, using an old scroll with a spell scrawled across it to open a portal back to our world. He claimed to be using it one last time, then burned it as he stepped through. She also saw how Wilsevith had once merged with the Ink Dragon himself, using another spell from its own memories to reset the creature back to how it had been when first created. Audrith spoke out those same words, and she was hurled from the beast's innards to the castle grounds, as the dragon shrank back to the first state she'd seen it in. Unfortunately, she knew this was a temporary fix. It would one day again become the monstrous Ink Dragon and torment the people of this realm. Using the memories she'd maintained from her connection with the Ink Dragon, she was finally able to create a portal home for herself, but that did not end her time in this dark realm. Now she uses her abilities to go back there regularly, trying to do all she can to make life tolerable for those trapped within and freeing all those she can. But all the while being very cautious about who she can trust and who is truly worthy of being released back into our world. The last thing she wanted to do was unleash the inky beasts of that realm to wreak havoc on our own.
Oh yeah, you don't want to let something like that into here. I have to say that
This was
an
a really
amazing
fun
take
challenge
on
trying
that
to work
game.
almost exclusively with just blue, black, and yellow for this. Also, I'll put the monster drawings up as posters on my Teespring store. They'll be linked in the description by the time you're watching
Do
this.
it.
If you're
Buy
new to the
them.
channel and you want
Support
something else
them.
Bendy related on here, I have used the character once before in famous video game villains if they were superheroes. That is one of my better episodes, but tone-wise, if you want something more similar, I'd recommend checking out the second episode of my FNAF animatronics as dragons. Technically, I should be recommending that you start with the first episode in that series, because it is a trilogy, but really the story kicks
There we
off in
go.
part 2. But
Well,
besides that, that's all for today, except, of course, for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note. And the thought I want to leave people with today is a quote I heard this week from a man named Rory Vaden, who says that if you have diluted focus, you'll get diluted results. And I'll use myself as an example
Now
for that.
makes
When I started
sense.
this channel, there were tons of other things I wanted to try. Wanted to try writing another book. I wanted to try doing animated series and
Ooh,
comic books and just
that would be
tons of different
cool.
things. But if I tried to do all of those things at once, instead of focusing on one main thing, then I probably wouldn't be where I am today. I'd have a little bit of an improvement in all of those
That's
categories.
true.
And now that I have an established audience, if I do decide I want to branch off into more things, there's already people that are interested in seeing what I
Hell
do
yeah,
in those
man.
realms.
Give us some
I hope
animation.
that's
That would
inspiring
be
to someone
awesome.
out there. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Monday. Goodbye.
Alright, folks, and that is going to be the end of today's video. So, I want you all to remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Down in the description will be a link to the original video, so remember to support the original creator and all they do. And I'll see all you folks next time when we flick on. Peace out.